Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. Hello. As more and more of us trickle in here, I would love it if you all could introduce yourselves in the chat with your name, your organization. And I would love to know what your first memory of a computer was in your life. I know for myself, I have fond memories of playing solitaire or pinball on my parents' computers way back in the late 90s, early 2000s. But thank you all for joining us. We're going to give everyone a moment to roll in here. But as we do, I would love it if you all could introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your organization, and your first memory of working with a computer or just using one for fun. Is it a video game? I know I still have that kind of dial-up sound from my childhood trying to use the phone and internet at once in my head. Fond memories there. And now we can surf the internet on our phones, so we're far ahead now. Welcome, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started in just a moment here, but as folks trickle in, would be great if you all could share your name and organization in the chat, as well as state your first memory with a computer. Curious to hear what it's been for folks. All right. Ooh, I love seeing these pour in here. Perfect. Ebony, I see Oregon Trail on your Zenith computer at school. Yes, I love that. Atari, amazing, amazing. Hi, everyone.
Is she gone? I haven't
got some more folks trickling in here. We're going to go ahead and get rolling in just a minute here. But it would be great if you could introduce yourself with your name, your organization, and your first memory with a computer. I see more Oregon Trails coming in. Yes. Or loading up floppy disks. Oh, I remember that was elementary school for me, big on the floppy disk. Amazing. Thank you all for joining us. Renee, you say using it like a word processor? No, my mom in the 80s actually used to train people on how to use email when computers were like the size of a whole room. So I always think fondly on that. All righty. Welcome, welcome, folks. Oh, I love seeing this. Using chess on the computer. Fantastic. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and let folks keep pouring in here, but we're going to go ahead and get rolling. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Welcome to our Regional Industry Advisory Meeting for the Information and Communications Technology sector. And today we're going to be focusing on cybersecurity. So really appreciate your attendance and your participation here today, as these advisory events inform community college curriculum and really help to align the workforce pipeline. So before we get started, I want to introduce myself. I know you met me in our fun icebreaker here, but my name is Caitlin Blockus, and I am a project manager at Valley Vision, and I'll be facilitating our advisory here today with some of my other Valley Vision colleagues. And before we get started, I really want to say a huge thank you to all of our supporters and partners. These advisories are sponsored by the Los Rios Community College District with strong workforce funds in conjunction with the Centers of Excellence, Yuba, Sierra, and Lake Tahoe Community Colleges, and the Sacramento County Office of Education. And these events are also supported by the Capital Region's 4 workforce boards, which include SETA or Sacramento Works, Golden Sierra Job Training Agency, YOLA Works, and the North Central Counties Consortium. So a huge thank you to our supporters for helping make this happen. And before we get started, I also just want to quickly review some housekeeping here. It would be great if you all could keep your cameras on. We love seeing your beautiful faces here, and so encourage you to do so if possible. We also encourage everybody to stay on mute unless you're called on to ask a question. We will have a ton of time for questions and answers and different things going on there, but until that time would be great.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
Great example. Yep. Additionally, we would appreciate if everybody could submit all questions and commentary using the chat function. Our team will be reviewing the chat and bringing some things forward. So we're definitely tuned in and love to see a robust connections and conversation in the chat. And this meeting will be recorded and provided as part of post-meeting materials along with our PowerPoint and kind of all materials that are distributed today. So you will get a recording as well as our PowerPoint and additional materials. And just want to briefly touch on our agenda. You are here with me in our welcome and introduction, and I will be passing it over to Marcus Geisler just shortly, who is the professor of computer information science at Cosumnes River College. Following that, we will hear from our keynote speaker, followed by some labor market analysis, our industry panel discussion, and our conclusion and next steps at 4:50. And I am passionate about getting you all here right on the dot at 5. Don't want to keep you late on a school night or a work night. So that's what our agenda looks like here. And without further ado, I will pass it over to Marcus Geisler, professor of computer information science at Cosumnes River College, who's also a wonderful member of our planning team for this advisory. So I will pass it over to Marcus.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Caitlin. Appreciate it. And welcome from my side as well. Some of you may remember me. I used to serve as the Deputy Sector Navigator and then Regional Director for Employer Engagement for ICT for the Greater Sacramento or North Region, as we call it. And I'm no longer in that position, haven't been in quite some time, but they asked for some faculty help with the planning so that we could get that faculty voice into that as well. And I was happy to oblige, which I guess brings me really quickly to reiterating the purpose of why we have these regional advisories. And they're really to develop and maintain partnerships between educators and our industry partners. They also allow our industry partners to inform us as educators about current trends and developments. And I've always felt it important that we listen, because this is one of those great opportunities for us educators to have industry partners around the table. And we have both a great keynote speaker as well as a wonderful panel later on. So I hope, I know that you will get some great information out of that. And last but not least, of course, this is a forum for us to exchange information with the goal of improving our academic programs. Because at the end of the day, we're doing this for our students. And that's, for whom we want to make sure that we can provide, especially in this field of ICT in general, and certainly cybersecurity, which is our focus today, with as current of a curriculum as possible. I do want to provide you with a quick update that I received this morning from Blaine Smith of the North Far North Regional Consortium. And they are in the process of hiring new assistant directors of employer partnerships, which are kind of a follow-up to the regional directors. And there's specifically going to be one for business and IT, who's going to be responsible for business, IT, cyber, and public service for the North region, so for Greater Sacramento. And there's 4 other disciplines, 4 other sectors, I should say. And those folks are scheduled to come online sometime between April 21st and July 1st of this year. So we hope that there will be some more regional leadership for specifically ICT, but also for the other sectors in the near future. And frankly, I look forward to that, to having somebody again coordinate those activities that we do here. And for the Far North, and I see a couple of you who've joined us from the Far North region, they were expecting, I saw a number of 7 generalists, that could be 6, but I think it's 7, for all sectors across the Far North. So they're structuring it a little bit differently, but they too will have those great opportunities for collaboration again, and that'll be very good to see. All right, so much for my update. My next job and my pleasure is to introduce our keynote speaker. FBI Supervisory Special Agent Nathaniel Lee entered on duty as a special agent of the FBI in 2005. He's taken on a variety of assignments during his career, both domestically and internationally, with a specialty in cyber and high-tech crimes. He currently leads an interdisciplinary team responsible for complex cyber investigations, cyber threat intelligence, and digital forensic examinations. I had a chance to meet him in person a few weeks ago at an FBI Cyber Academy, and I know that you will enjoy his keynote. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Supervisory Special Agent Nathaniel Lee of the FBI.
Well, thank you very much, Professor, for the kind introduction. It was great to meet you at the Academy. And it's also great to be here and talk to the group here today. Just want to make sure that everyone can see my screen before we begin. No? All right, so. How about now? All right. Thank you. So we're talking about cybersecurity, which depending on how, I guess, how adept you are, how frequent you deal with the issue, it may be, you may be very familiar with it, or you may not. But what's for sure is everyone has heard all the incidents and the colonial pipeline. So what I'm hoping today is to give an overview of cybersecurity world, how the FBI fits into that world, and what we hope to achieve with a collaborative relationship with the public, and then round it out with some of the technical skills, technical positions that the FBI have in the fight, in the cybersecurity fight. So when we talk about cybersecurity, it's one of those fields where prevention is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So an ounce of prevention, what can we do? Some of the basic, the best practices that we recommend, and it's not just the FBI, but the entire cybersecurity industry, is to limit access to those who need it. That means that it is the principle of least privilege. You are only given enough computing privilege to accomplish the official job that you are required to do. What that does is it reduces the attack surface. If I don't have a need to access certain resources on the network, I shouldn't be given there. It doesn't matter if I'm a chief technology officer or a chief executive officer, but if I don't have a need to go to that server or access those resources, there's no need for my account to have that, right? Because if I have it, then I become an extra attack surface that the attackers can then leverage. Segment networks and important data. What that means is we got to figure out what data is valuable, what data should be protected, should be with a little more scrutiny, what data should be accessible to certain groups, but not others. And the way we architect our network and our resources should reflect those priorities. Once the attacker come into their network, we should make it as difficult as possible for them to poke around and grab data. If our data is just out there and there's no segmentation, there's no layered defenses, then once they're in, they have access to everything. Application control, and there's two types. You have whitelisting and blacklisting. Basically, whitelisting is these are the known goods, and you can only access the known good applications. If anything is not in this approved list, on this approved list, you can't use them. You can't install them, you can't use them, you can't deploy it. That's clearly more restrictive. It's safer, but it's more restrictive, which generally means less convenient. Blacklist is when we block all the known DATs, which is is less restrictive, more convenient, more flexibility, but obviously with that comes with extra risk because you're only blocking the known DAT. You don't know the unknown DATs that may be coming to your network. Strong passwords and multi-factor authentication It is amazing how just that MFA, that second factor, whether it is on an SMS or on a hard token or soft token, that alone raises the bar quite a bit. And once we get beyond passwords, because what we've found out about passwords the past 20 years, that computing resources in IT has exploded, is people reuse passwords. People forget passwords, right? And so it is a very cumbersome to reset and remember passwords to 25, 30 different accounts. So people just end up using the same ones or very similar. And what happens is once one of their accounts are compromised, then all of their accounts are compromised. Once the personal accounts are compromised and they use the same password as their professional account, work account, that opens up the door to the professional, the work network to be compromised as well. So adding that second factor helps. Now, in terms of how secure the different options are, I would say the hard token that's not connected to any device, that's the hardest, and that's the most secure, because it's the bad guys can't get to that device because it's a standalone device. It's not connected to anything. The soft token that you may have on your phone, that would be less secure because it's connected to a device. If they have your phone, they have the token. And the least would be the least of these the MFA option. The least secure would be SMS, because it travels over the air and it can be captured over the air, and in itself it's not encrypted. So that makes it less secure than the other two options. However, it's better than not having any at all. Remove legacy protocols sometimes for very, very legitimate business reasons. We have legacy protocol, necessary business software that haven't been upgraded, industry specific software. It is normal to have legacy protocols. So can we remove them? If we can, let's remove them, right? If the protocols are just there because we've simply forgotten about them, we've upgraded and we've forgotten about them, we should go through, remove those attack surfaces from, right? Reduce our attack surface. If we have legacy protocols that we need to use for a legitimate reason, then that's when all of the other factors will come in. The strong password, the application control, segment network, all of that will come in and form a layered defense. So the vulnerable legacy protocol itself is not out there on its own being easily exploited. No normal, meaning we cannot detect bad things going on in a network if we don't know what our network normally looks like. Like if we step into our house and we see things that are out of place, we know, because we know what things should look like normally. Same thing with our network. And sometimes we don't do that. Sometimes we don't log enough, we don't monitor enough, or we log too much, and it just becomes noise at that point. And it's really hard to pick out the interesting events that we should be scrutinizing, looking at more, right? It's easier to pick 1 out of 100 than 1 out of a million. But if we're only logging 100, we may be missing stuff, right? So it's a balance. There's no science, it's a balance that we have to kind of look at what our needs are. And there's a strategy behind it to monitor, aggregate logs, so that we know what is an acceptable level of normal to us. And then patch. Everyone knows we should patch, but not everything gets patched timely. Again, there may be good reasons. There may be reasons where if I patch, I'm not sure if my existing application will work well, because sometimes you patch one thing and it breaks 2 other things. So there's obviously a need to test the patch and all that, right? And that's fine, as long as it's an intentional act and there's thought behind it and there's a plan to mitigate the vulnerability while we're testing the patch, right? The danger comes in when the whole world knows about the vulnerability. It's well publicized. The bad guys know about it. The moment they know about it, 2 minutes later, they're out there looking for machines running those vulnerability versions. And 6 months later, we still haven't patched. And that can be a problem. We become low-hanging fruit, right? And then do not assume a crack is too small to be noticed or exploited. Sometimes we think that we can, I'm a small company, I'm a small organization, I'm a government organization, I'm an education organization. There's nothing here for them to take. Who would want to rob me, right? Who would digitally rob me? Or yeah, maybe that's a kind of an obscure application we're using. That's probably not a big deal. Or the bad guys look for exactly that. Look for those small cracks. They just need a foothold. They can get in. And once they're in, then they can spend the resources to do other things. So that's an ounce of prevention. Those are the things that we can do to harden our cybersecurity defenses. Now, what happens when we need a pound of cure, right? Something bad happens. What do we do? So that list right there, I won't go, we won't have time to go through all of those, but that is the kind of the traditional process by which we respond to a cyber incident. We prepare, we identify the threat, we contain the threat, contain the issue, we eradicate the issue, recover from it, and then we have a kind of a hot wash, a lessons learned. What do we learn? What do we do better next time? A lot of the thing that the FBI would advise is the preparation phase sets you up for everything that comes after. Part of that preparation phase is discussing about cybersecurity to plan for the incident when it happens. A lot of organizations have emergency plans. What happens when we do, what do we do when there's an earthquake, when power is cut, when there's a forest fire, when there's a riot outside, right? They have an emergency plan that covers all these different events that may happen, how do we fall back and how do we recover. But a lot of times the plan doesn't address cybersecurity. What if we lose our computing resources? What happens is, in today's world, we lose our computing resources, we're done. We send employees home because there's nothing they can do. They just sit there at work and look at each other, right? So if a cyber incident has that much of an effect, if it has an effect to completely stop work, why don't we consider that an emergency? And why don't we add that into our plan? And what do we do when that happens? There's ransomware. I'm sure you've heard about it lately. It's a big problem. Ransomware does not discriminate who they target. There are indications that we've seen things out there where the ransomware gangs, if they happen to land into a network of a multi-billion-dollar company, their ransomware demand will be higher. If they happen to go to land in a mom and pop shop and they find out, they'll ask for a few $100s. Whatever it is, they will tailor their extortion according to what they perceive is the victim organization's ability to pay, right? So what do we do as an organization? How do we protect ourselves? Does our emergency plan address cybersecurity? How does it address balancing evidence collection in business operations? If something happens and our network goes down, the most immediate need is get it back up and get me running again. The problem is, if we don't know what happened, if we don't collect enough evidence and analyze to see how did this happen to us, what could we have done better? If we don't have the evidence to analyze and guide us toward that, how do we do better? Then we can have a brand new pristine network, and in 2 days, it'll be exploited again because we never fixed the original problem, because we never knew what the original problem was. And then also, in our haste to get a network up and running, we may lose valuable evidence that may give us, that may point us to the culprit, which would then enable the FBI, right, law enforcement, to take enforcement action. So how do we, and so as part of that, how do we, a lot of times we would have a cyber incident, we'll work with the victim, and it'll be very collaborative at first. And then after a short while, communications will stop. And generally, it could be, I used to say it's one reason. I just recently found out that it's 2 reasons. The first reason is legal. Sometimes lawyers get involved and there are certain regulations, or just to play it safe, we probably shouldn't share all of this because we don't know what the implications are. It may hurt our stock price, it may hurt our reputation, and all of those are very valid concerns. But the point of this talk is all of those should be thought of prior to the incident, right? So we should kind of tabletop exercises out, and we say, hey, if we were to get hit with a cyber incident and we are down and the FBI comes to work with us to collect evidence, and we have a third party or IT department, a third party cybersecurity company helping us to recover, what can we share? What can we not share? What's our priorities, right? If you have that baked into the plan, we don't have to make hasty decisions while we're dealing with the incident, because chances are we won't be making good decisions under pressure. The second reason I recently found out, and it's a very valid reason, is for companies who've gone and put their IT assets in the cloud, whether AWS or Google or Microsoft Azure or whatever cloud services, there is a cost. Putting your data on the cloud doesn't cost a whole lot. Pulling your data off of the cloud apparently costs quite a bit. So in pulling data off, in the process of collecting evidence, that costs money. So sometimes maybe the FBI or law enforcement will ask for those data, and there's a cost associated with it, and the victim's not prepared to pay for that cost. So then, okay, we're probably just going to recover and just go on. Now that piece of information I just recently learned. So that is certainly a very legitimate reason, but that should be baked into the plan. What do we do? What would be our, if that happened, what is our budget for it? What can we do, right? And now that I know that, I've recently learned that. So now that I know that, on my end, we'll have to think about, well, what if, it's one thing to have a big company that has resources. What if it's a small company and they can't afford that, but we need that evidence? What can we do to help, right? And that's a conversation that probably we're going to have internally within the FBI or within the law enforcement community. Cyber insurance. A lot of organizations say, well, I have to have cyber insurance. They'll take care of that. But you probably should know the terms and the conditions of the policy, because the policy may require certain things to be in place before they spend money, right? Before they pay out, or before they send a cybersecurity company to help. Okay? The question that when I do these talks, and especially the ones where we focus on ransomware, the question is always, well, do I pay the ransom? Do I am I breaking any law if I pay the ransom? All these questions are all very valid questions. And usually it revolves around what the FBI would say, well, the official advice is don't pay the ransom because it encourages bad behavior, and it makes the economics of ransomware more viable if people pay, right? If you don't pay and there's no money behind it, then the criminals wouldn't do it. So that's the advice of the FBI. But when you're one victim and you must have this data, or you must be back up and running, and paying is the only option, it makes it a very difficult decision not to pay. So again, in the spirit of thinking about these things ahead of time before the incident happens, I'm proposing that, the two questions there, the subheadings there, I'm proposing to think of it, whereas before we are affected with ransomware, the first question is, figure out amongst ourselves, under what conditions would I pay the ransom? If my email server gets encrypted, do I pay the ransom? If the server that contains all my client information gets encrypted, do I pay the ransom then? Right? If my intellectual property gets encrypted, do I then pay the ransom? Right? So we have to kind of work out this, under what conditions would I pay the ransom? And once we figure out those conditions under which we would pay the ransom, then the next step is, how can I prevent that from happening in the first place? How can I prevent those conditions from materializing? Now that I know that that's kind of the red line, how do I protect myself from ever getting past that red line? So switching gear to FBI cyber strategy, how do we, the FBI, then fit into that cybersecurity mission? So the overall mission statement of the FBI, of big FBI, is protect the American people and uphold the Constitution of the United States. The mission of the FBI cyber division, the cyber mission, is to impose risk and consequences on cyber adversaries. And our vision for doing that is so that the American people can have safety, security, and confidence in a digitally connected world. What do we do, the FBI? What do we do in terms of the cyber mission? We investigate these incidents, significant cyber incidents, and by that I mean, a lot of times we would get complaints about victims losing a couple $1,000, and by themselves, these few $1,000 incidents, the losses are just not high enough to warrant federal resources. But many, many times, those are one or two victims out of 100,000. And they're victimized by the same group of criminals. The more people report, and the more we can connect the dots, the easier it is for the FBI and also the U.S. Department of Justice to then commit resources to these things. If we can put the picture together where, hey, there's 200,000 customers, each being victimized an average of $3,000 to $5,000. Well, that's a big amount. Whereas if we only have one or two, it makes it harder to justify the resources. Right. So what do we do in these significant cyber incidents? We collect evidence and intelligence, we identify victims, pursue disruption opportunities, which could mean arrest, prosecution, maybe send information to foreign partners so that they can help us extradite the criminals. If they're in countries where it's hard to get to, or we don't have a good relationship with those countries, then maybe we can look at sanctions and other tools that are outside of law enforcement. But we, as a law enforcement agency, would contribute to the bigger picture by the evidence and the intelligence and the prosecution piece. Technical position. So what does the FBI need in terms of human resource, talent, technical talent to help us do what we do? So we have the special agent position. That's the traditional investigator position. Special agents could have a variety of expertise, one of which is technical expertise for cyber investigation. So for myself, I'm a special agent. I was a computer science major when I went to college, right? So bringing that knowledge and having that technical background to help conduct technical investigations. Intelligence analysts, same thing. The job of the intel analyst is to look at all these investigations we have across the field office, across the country, and trying to make out the bigger strategic view. What is happening? What is the trend? What should we focus on? Right, we have computer scientists. That position is a technical position, usually computer science majors. They'll come in and they'll have coding coding software development capabilities to help us to develop custom solutions, to help us analyze technical evidence that we may collect, from network to endpoint device, a variety of things. We have data analysts to help us figure out, well, here's the giant pile of data that we've collected in the course of our investigations. What relates to what? How do we make sense of all of this data, especially for IT folks? You guys know logs, millions of lines of logs, the vast majority of them. How do we sift through and pick out the bad, right? So the data analysts will help us to do that. The digital forensic examiner, those are endpoint technical specialists, where they look at a computer and they look at the processes running on the computer, artifacts on the computer, on the server themselves, and trying to find the evidence, the digital artifacts on the computer, on the server, so that we can put together the big picture and identify and prosecute the people behind it. Okay. Going real fast through public-private partnerships. We have the FBI Citizens Academy, which is something that every FBI field office does, including our office in Sacramento. We would give an overview of the FBI and all the programs. So this would be a broader, counterintelligence program, counterterrorism program, criminal investigative program, cyber program, just all of that. And then we have the FBI Cyber Academy, which locally is something new that we're doing, and we're hoping to make it an annual thing going forward. But what it does is it took its inspiration from the Citizens Academy, but it focuses on just the cyber stuff, right? So you would hear, going to the Cyber Academy, you would hear talks on our cyber cases that we may have done. You would hear presentations from those job positions that I just listed out earlier: the computer scientists, the data analysts, the digital forensic examiners. InfraGuard is something that we've been doing a long time. It's short for Infrastructure Guard. It's just a community of all the companies and organizations that are classified as critical infrastructure: water, power, education. I believe there's 15 or 16 sectors that are considered critical to our economy. And so they would join InfraGuard and share information. Sometimes something that's happening with the power industry may be of relevance to other industries. And without sharing, we wouldn't know. So that's what InfraGuard exists to do. Internet Crime Complaint Center is where victims can go and file reports to advise us of the cyber incidents that they've been victimized of, right? They've been victims of. They can also go to those links to get industry alerts. What those are is, I talked about intelligence earlier. As the FBI collect intelligence, we would disseminate those intelligence to the public so that the public can help protect themselves, right? So, for example, if we know that there's a criminal group using certain internet infrastructure or certain techniques to victimize organizations, when appropriate, we will share those with the public so that they can then protect themselves, harden the network. Okay. So all of that is to get to the point where We can collaborate. The FBI does not see what's going on in organizations' networks. The IT administrators of that company, of that organization, see stuff that's going on in their network. So it would be nice, and it will be to everyone's benefit, the society's benefit, where we have these sharing, that we're willing to share these, hey, we were just attacked by this, and whether we were victims or we were able to successfully repel the attack, we successfully protected ourselves. And here's what we're seeing in our network. Enough of those data points collected, we can then disseminate to the broader audience, the broader public, so that we can all become more secure. Okay, how can we collaborate and share those threat intelligence? And that is certainly a conversation that needs to be had before the cybersecurity, before the incident happens, so that when it does, should it happen, there's already prior thought, right? And we're not trying to make decisions, critical decisions, under duress. And so that's why I'm here. That's why we do these talks, so that we can encourage the public to start thinking in those terms, that we can make everyone safer online. And with that, I know it was just kind of blast through all of the PowerPoint there. I wanted to get through it. I gave the basic knowledge there, and then I'm open to having fielding questions and answers.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Nathaniel. I think we are running just slightly over on time, so I'll ask folks to direct questions to the chat. And Nate, if you have the opportunity to answer, that would be fantastic. We'll also have some additional time for Q&A throughout the event. But thank you so much. Really appreciate that presentation. I'm like vigorously taking notes over here because cybersecurity is very new to me. I recently learned I need to update my browser, and now I'm frantic about doing that right after this advisory here today and stay as safe as possible. So really appreciate that. Amazing. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and take over some screen share now. If you all can see my screen, okay. I see thumbs up. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ebony Benzing, who is the research manager at the California Community College's Far North Center of Excellence, to break down some of the labor market analysis for us. So I will go ahead and pass it over to you, Ebony. Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon. Caitlin, are you going to run slides for me?
Yes, I got you. Perfect.
Thank you. Awesome sauce. All right. So let's go to the first slide. Perfect. Thank you. All right. So good afternoon. My name is Ebony Joy Benzing. I am the research manager for the Far North Center of Excellence for Labor Market Research, or the COE. Next slide, please. So there are 9 regional COEs and 1 statewide COE. Our collective mission is to support the development of career education programs in California's community colleges by providing relevant and up-to-date labor market data analyses. Next slide. The COE typically answers questions such as, what is the employment outlook for students who complete community college programs? What skills and credentials are needed for entry-level work in a particular area? And what kind of programs look ripe for investment at the community college level? Next slide. Today, I'm going to present an overview of the cybersecurity job landscape in the Greater Sacramento region. We're going to take a look at traditional labor market demand and projections, job postings data, which will include some skills analysis, and post-secondary educational supply of cybersecurity-related programs across the 7-county Greater Sacramento region. Next slide. So first up, traditional labor market data. It's called traditional labor market data because this is where you have all of your job projections and how many counts there are and whatnot. This data comes from EMSI Burning Glass and covers 9 ICT or information and communication technologies occupation plus 1 protective service occupation, that's detectives and criminal investigators in the Sacramento region. Next slide, please. Before I get into these numbers, I just want to point something out. It's really important to note that there is a cybersecurity occupation. Our traditional cybersecurity occupation is called information security analyst. But cybersecurity is also a task that is built into other ICT jobs, and these jobs are aptly called cyber-enabled. So they'll be performing cybersecurity related job tasks and roles in addition to some other primary functions that they're doing. This is the context for a lot or all of the data I'm presenting today. You're going to see some data that's relevant to our cybersecurity occupation, but a lot of the data is going to be built on that cyber-enabled group. So right here, what you have is a high-level snapshot of cybersecurity jobs in the Greater Sacramento region. It's based on the 10 occupations that I mentioned before. There were nearly 32,000 jobs in 2020, and these jobs are projected to increase to more than 33,000 jobs by 2025. The average job growth across these occupations is 5%, which is slightly below the regional's job growth average of 6% for all of the jobs in our area. There's an estimated 2,700 job openings each year for the next 5 years, and wages are great at around 96,000 as the median annual wage, and that translates to roughly $46 per hour. Next slide, please. Nowadays, I don't usually show tables because it's a lot of content and it's a lot of information to look at, but Marcus asked me to show it, and I thought it would be an opportune time to highlight which occupations make up the bulk of our cyber-enabled workforce and where most of the growth in our region is projected to occur. So please note that there is a longer version of this table at the end of the presentation. So I highly encourage you to take a look at that when you have a chance. It has wage data and some information about educational requirements. So for the Greater Sacramento region, nearly 2/3 of the cybersecurity workforce is concentrated in those first 2 occupations that you see at the top of the table: computer user support specialists and software developers, and software, I'm just going to say QA. These 2 occupations are projected to continue to hold 2/3 of the cybersecurity workforce in 2025. It's also where about 2/3 of our annual job openings are found. So it's just those first 2 occupations. Occupations with the most growth over the next 5 years include software developers / software QA occupation, with the potential to add about 1,000 new jobs by 2025. And you'll see that they have 812 annual job openings. So job openings each year for the next 5 years. Occupations with faster than average job growth in our region: software developers again at 12%, and then information security analysts at 18%. That information security analyst you'll see at the bottom of the table, that's our traditional cybersecurity occupation. So you'll see it's lower numbers than the other occupations, but it has significantly faster than average job growth for that occupation. Projected to add 92 new jobs through 2022 and have an estimated 58 annual job openings over the next 5 years. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at some job postings data, which is helpful because it helps to identify real-time demand and trends from our local employers. This covers the 7-county Greater Sacramento region, and it's based off of job postings that were found online in the last 12 months. Next slide. So I took 2 approaches with cybersecurity job postings. This is the first approach. I focused on those 10 occupations that were highlighted in the traditional labor market demand data section and looked at job postings for that group as a whole. That's what that 20,851 is. Then I applied a filter. I looked at within those 10 occupations, which had job postings that included some skill from the cybersecurity skill cluster. The cybersecurity skill cluster is a burning glass kind of framework for how they organize their skill sets. And it contains 125 distinct skills related to cybersecurity, including authentication, network security, threat intelligence, etc. So this is just a brief list that you see on the right here. When I applied that filter, I found nearly 2,400 job postings that were related to cybersecurity among those 10 occupations. Next slide, please. So among those 2,400 job postings for cybersecurity related jobs, industries with the most postings included our professional, scientific, and technical services type of industry. Think of this as kind of like business kind of related functions somewhat. I'm thinking about consulting businesses would fall in this group, engineering design businesses would fall in this group, and so on. Finance and insurance, which shouldn't be a surprise to us because Sacramento has a significant number of health insurance companies in the region. Manufacturing, public administration, which is also known as government for us. Educational services, information, and utilities. And I have a little note at the bottom of the screen there. It says 57% of that 2,400 job postings were found in these 7 sectors. The rest of the job postings are split over 20-something other industry sectors. Employers with the most job postings included Accenture, Deloitte, PG&E, Intel, and so on the list. And then some key findings around education and experience requirements. Across all of those cybersecurity job postings, the most preferred education level was a bachelor's degree. So about 62% of the job postings required a bachelor's degree. This is compared to 8% of job postings requiring a high school diploma, vocational training, or an associate's degree. And then 35% of job postings required job candidates to have 3 to 5 years of prior work experience in the field. This is compared to 9% of job postings requiring 0 to 2 years of experience. That would be our entry-level job bucket there. Next slide, please. So this is the second approach that I took with the job postings data. So rather than focus on those 10 occupations, I decided to broaden the search and look just at the cybersecurity skill cluster as a whole, and then map to occupations to see if I could cast a wider net and see, hey, what kind of roles are employers looking for, and how does that kind of fall within our occupational scheme? Next slide, please. What you're seeing here is a summary. I'm going to explain all the columns. So in the Greater Sacramento Region, the very first column, orange one, this is the list of top occupations that required a cybersecurity skill set of some kind. That includes your cyber/information security engineer/analyst. That's our traditional cybersecurity occupation. Software developer engineers, that also traces back to that software development and software quality assurance occupation. You have network engineers. You notice this list is mostly ICT type occupations with the exception of one, which is the second from the bottom there, business/management analyst. So the next 3 columns are focused on skills, and it's broken down into specialized skills, software skills, and human skills. These are co-occurring skills that happen to appear alongside cybersecurity related skills in the job postings. So some of the most important skills for people to have if they have the cybersecurity background include information security, project management, authentication, all seems very similar and very well aligned to that cybersecurity skill bucket. Top co-occurring software skills include Linux, Python, SQL, etc. And then co-occurring human skills include communication, teamwork, collaboration, problem solving, and our traditional list of what we need our workers to have. You'll notice that some of the skills have green little arrows next to them, Python and Microsoft Azure. Those are skills that are growing in demand at the national level. So we could probably assume that if they're growing in demand at the national level, there might be a similar type of growth happening here in our Greater Sacramento region. So those will be important skills for students to have. Next slide, please. So for the last part of my presentation, we'll take a brief look at educational program supply from post-secondary training providers across the Greater Sacramento region. This is a little bit of a rougher estimate than usual. I am taking a really broad look at basically all of the training programs that would align to those 9 ICT occupations, which is a lot, and using that to try to focus in around kind of supply, like how well are our region's colleges doing at supplying workers for these jobs that we're going to need in the future. The thought is that while these training programs may be focusing on specific topics like computer science or like database management or something like that, they may have a component or a specialized topic around cybersecurity included in them. But that's kind of hard for me to know at the top level. I think that would be like one of those discussions that would happen at the college level to be like, hey, does your computer programming class offer some kind of training related to cybersecurity? And if not, maybe we should consider adding that, right? So this is really just a rough estimate, okay? Next slide, please. So from this slide, you see that we have a wide and full spectrum of training providers ranging from public, those are our community colleges and our public 4-year colleges and universities, so CSU SAC and UC Davis, to private. One of the private 4 years in the area of William Jessup, and then some other post-secondary colleges as well. So each of the colleges and universities listed here offers some kind of training related to our ICT occupations. And they may have cybersecurity as a special focus within those programs. Together, these institutions issued an average of 1,100 awards per year over the last 5 years in what I'll say cybersecurity related training programs. So hash my little marks there, okay? Next slide, please. This is a list of programs, okay? So this is the entire program list that I pulled together to try to count these things. If you're within the community college system, you'll recognize some of the names and some of them might look a little bit different to you. I'm not using the top code system here, I'm using SIP. But our programs do fall within these SIP coded systems. And you'll see 5 years of completions data. It says the year in the parentheses, that's going to be the end of the academic year. So 2016 is for the academic year 2015 to 2016. The bulk of completions in our region happen to fall within the first 5 rows of the table. That's about 90% of the words. So computer science, computer support specialists, computer systems networking and telecommunications, computer and information systems security / auditing / information assurance, and then computer programming. 90% of our region's awards were in those 5 program areas, the remaining 10% in the programs below. So next slide, please. That concludes my presentation. Really brief, broad overview, but hopefully it gives you something to kind of kick against. And I think we might have time for questions, perhaps. Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say, Ebony, I know you joked around about including the data slides for Marcus, but I'm a data nerd and I also love seeing them. So thank you. And I know that there are 2 additional slides after that ending slide that will show folks in the final set of PowerPoint that will be sent out to you all. So you too can obsess over the data like I did.
So, yeah, do we have any questions? All right. If you come up with something later, feel free to, Joseph.
I was trying to type, but I guess I don't type quite fast enough. Thanks. I love the presentation. Do you have possibly in the back-end data on the degrees awarded on level? So what was graduate, what was bachelor's, what was associates? Just kind of thinking through how to apply that to our certainly our programs at the university.
Yeah, I do have a breakdown in my data elsewhere, but I can tell you I stopped at the bachelor degree level. So a huge chunk of that is bachelor degrees coming out of Sac State and Davis, to a lesser extent, William Jessup. But yeah, there's a really big number of them in there for the bachelor's degree. If I can pull it up quick, I'll let you know what it is. Linda, do you want to ask your question?
I do. Thank you so much, Ebony. That was an absolutely wonderful report. And I relied on the COE reports in the past to develop my programs. And I'm wondering, I know in the far north, the last one I think we had for cybersecurity was in 2018. So do you have a copy or a link to that new report that you had so that I could use it?
Yeah. If you send me your email over a little chat, I will email it to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's great.
All right, cool. Joseph, I'm not able to find the breakdown of awards, but I will pull that together and send it out as well.
I'm just very interested to see it. I think that's great, particularly as we map that back to the demand, local demand.
Okay, sounds good. Anything else? All right.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ebony, and thanks for following up with that. We can also send out any additional materials on our end to help you out a little bit there. So thank you again so much. All righty. Moving on in here, we're going to jump into our industry panel discussion. So really excited here to welcome with us today. We have Tanya Webb, the Managing Director at Deloitte, Benjamin Tralia, the Associate Director at Accenture, Andrew Maroon, the Director of Information Security at Golden One Credit Union, and David Bitter, Cybersecurity Manager at SMUD. So big welcome and thank you to our panelists for joining us today. We have a couple questions we'll move through, but are also definitely opening up some Q&A at the end here. So I would encourage folks to put any questions they have for panelists in the chat, and we'll definitely bring those forward. But just to kick us off here and do a little bit of introductions, our first question is asking folks if they can provide a brief overview of your organization or business, including your role, the main services or products you provide, kind of a background on your workforce, including, a size, ballpark size, how big is your company, and how you recruit employees, as well as their general skill levels and educational attainment, which I know is a big question. We are a big fan of those at Valley Vision, and one of our colleagues is also going to be dropping those questions in the chat, and I'll repeat them as well. But maybe I think I'll pitch it to you, Tanya, first to provide an overview of Deloitte and your position there.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. First, thank you for having me, and also thank you for doing this. I think cybersecurity is such a hot skill to have, so I'm glad you all are really supporting that. So as Caitlin mentioned, my name is Tanya Webb. I'm a managing director at Deloitte. Deloitte is a global professional services firm. That means that we serve clients globally, both commercial clients as well as government clients. I currently sit in our government practice, but I've been with Deloitte 25 years. So I spent 23 years in commercial, and I spent the last 2 years in our government practice. My current role is leading our risk and financial advisory team here in California. So our services are grouped into 4 big buckets within the firm. We have a tax group, which is self-explanatory. And then we have audit and insurance, and those professionals, they audit our main clients. And then we have consulting, which is broad, and consulting includes like human capital, just really working with human resources organizations, broader technology, risk and financial advisory. We also do we support CFOs in looking at their processes, any risk associated. Cyber's in that practice as well. So I tell people we do everything, and we have professionals that does everything. The challenge is we're so large, can I find them? So the biggest value that I bring to my team is my 25 years at Deloitte and my network, because I can find people that can serve our clients in their unique skills.
Thank you so much. And I will pass that same question over to Ben to describe, a brief overview of your organization or business, including your role, some of the services you provide, and then kind of the breakdown of what your workforce looks like size-wise or how they're recruited, as well as education levels. I'll pass it to you, Ben.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you having me here today as well. Exciting talking about this stuff. I'm like a techie nerd when it comes to security, so I love this topic and just can't get enough of it. And just been lucky to have been doing it too since high school, and continued on with that throughout my education and throughout my career. So I work for Accenture. We're a global consulting firm. We have almost, I want to say, like 700,000 employees throughout the world. But we do plenty of other things besides security. Security is just one of the arms within Accenture. Some of those things that we do within security, we help clients prepare and respond to threats, help transform their different enterprises that they have into a new security footprint. We can also help run security at scale. We have a managed security service with a bunch of different offerings as well. My name's Benjamin Trollia. I'm an associate director within Accenture within Health and Public Service West. I have over 14 years experience building, designing, operating security solutions for public service clients within the state of California. I was born and raised in this area, grew up in Stockton, went to school in Stockton as well, went to school at Delta and at UOP, and was also an intern into Accenture. So I've kind of been through that program and seen what it's like and how they have relationships with some of the universities out there. We do hire at all sorts of different levels, all the way down to just a high school diploma, GED. We have avenues for that, associate's degrees, and then also bachelor's now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ben. And I will pass it over to Andrew next to give again here, overview of your business or organization, including your role, some of the main services you provide, and then kind of what your workforce looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super excited to be here also. And so Andrew Maroon, I'm a director of information security over at Golden One Credit Union. Probably a lot of folks on this call are members of Golden One or at some time have touched Golden One, seeing that we're pretty large in the Greater Sacramento region, as well as the Central Valley and some presence in Southern California. So we're obviously a credit union, a financial institution. We never call it a bank because we are member owned, a not-for-profit, which is a vast difference for us as a differentiator, and we give back to the community as well. Not that banks don't, but we are very ingrained in the community within the region. So we have about a little bit over 1 million members, consumers of our financial services. And we do everything from traditional retail banking, if you will, such as checking, savings, as well as loans, home lending, indirect lending, which just means when you go to a car dealership and you apply for a loan, and you want to get the best rate, and you might come through Golden One from an application perspective. So my team specifically, from an information security perspective, Roughly the size, you know, it ebbs and flows depending on what we have going on, but about 15 individuals. Ben mentioned managed services. We have, of course, employee managed services. So we have 24/7 visibility from a response perspective, depending on what's going on from an attack. And as you can imagine, as a financial institution, anytime you have money, attackers typically want that money and fraudsters want that money. So it also blends the technology with the traditional side of the fraud house, where we work with internal partners on detecting fraud, mitigating fraud, because money moves digitally now, right? Even though we have a large presence in branches, most of the money movement is from a technology perspective. How we recruit in general really depends. We do leverage partners, recruiting firms. We have internal recruiters. You know, it's just word of mouth as well. We have a lot of folks who have been at the organization a long time, and we also promote internally a lot, to be honest, right? We want to help people get into the cybersecurity space in general terms internally, and they have a lot of knowledge on the organization. As far as a little bit more background on myself, I've been with the organization 4 years. I saw information assurance that Ebony shared as one of the titles. That's what my degree is in from Cal State San Bernardino as a concentration within the School of Business. And then I also went to Sac State for my executive MBA program. So thanks for having me here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us and making that connection. Really appreciate it. And I'll pose the same question to you, David. If you could provide an overview of your organization, your role, some of the services you provide, and then kind of a background on what your workforce looks like.
Sure thing. Yeah, I'm at SMUD, Sacramento Municipal Utility District. So many of you probably get your electricity from us. So we've got about, I think it's around 2,200 employees and a bunch of contractors mixed in there as well. I'm the manager of SMUD's Cybersecurity Governance, Risk, and Compliance team. I'm one of normally 2 cybersecurity managers. The other one left recently, so I got double duty right now. But these 2 manager positions report to the Director of Cybersecurity or the Chief Information Security Officer, who reports to SMUD's Chief Innovation and Information Officer. So looking down from the Director of Cybersecurity, there are about 30 positions that are approved. Right now, there are 6 vacancies. 2 are part-time and 4 are full-time vacancies. And we do have 1 student intern currently from Sac State. So the functions that our department provides are cybersecurity engineering. We have an integrated security operations center, have emergency operations, incident management, identity and access management, have audit assessment and monitoring function, asset security, host and network security, cybersecurity risk, awareness training and education focused on cybersecurity, compliance, privacy specialist, a policy specialist, and an OT cybersecurity team. So how we recruit, generally we use an internal recruiter, and I just say, hey, we're not getting enough qualified candidates. What else are you going to do? How are you going to reach wider this time, or how are we going to find these or fill these hard to fill positions? I don't actively get engaged and say, why don't we do this or we should do this. I just rely on the internal recruiter to go deeper, harder, wider, whatever.
Oh, thank you. And considering you're working double duty, especially thank you for taking the time to be here today. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing screens. I wanted you all to see their lovely smiles on these headshots. They're so glowing here. But I'm going to stop sharing screen and give you all a better chance to see the panelists. And then jump into our second question here, which is a bit shorter than the first, asking panelists, what does a day in the life of a cybersecurity or ICT professional look like? And I'm going to reverse the order here. And David, I'm going to throw that right back at you.
All right. It really depends on the function. I ran through those pretty quick, but we have a lot. We're at the size right now where, that you know, Ebony went through some of those job descriptions, and most of those really are not what I have, and not even what I'm looking for. That general information assurance or information security analyst position has been specialized in my mind quite a bit. And in our organization, it definitely has, such that there's not really a generalist. Probably the closest to that is our Integrated Security Operations Center positions, where we have, that's kind of where we're growing internal talent. A lot of the interns that we've brought in through the college intern programs that we have tend to start there and get some experience there and start to learn more specialist skills and positions. But they're the ones that are, you know, they're responding to, you know, phishing reports. They're looking at threat intelligence coming in from partners and subscriptions that we have. They're looking at the alerts that our systems generate, and looking for any anomalies that need to be investigated, a little bit of threat hunting out of that, you know, that's a term that the cybersecurity community is using more and more, is threat hunting, but it's really about digging in when we're seeing some of those alerts and seeing some indicators something's a little bit out of the ordinary and worth looking into. That's probably the basic stuff. The other ones you can really probably tell that, you know, compliance, you can tell by the title there, what that function does. My privacy person, my policy person, you can tell what they're all doing. Cybersecurity engineering. So it really depends on the function here, what the day-to-day is, I think. But the ones that are more entry level are probably those ISOC, Integrated Security Operations Center positions I said, and those kind of entry level analyst type tasks.
Thank you so much, David. And kind of, again, I'll pass it on to Andrew and pose the same question. You know, what does a day in the life look like as an ICT or cybersecurity professional?
Yeah, we take, we definitely have specialties. We take maybe a little bit of a different approach than SMUD. And the reason being, for us, it's very intentional. And we still kept some generalist roles where they can kind of be I don't know if you want to talk about like from a six man in a basketball term, where they can do a little bit of everything. And that's actually for various different reasons. It's to prevent for a smaller team in some instances of having a single point of failure, but also, so if someone leaves, which we don't want them to, but also from their perspective, it allows them to really have no day always be the same, and they can work with each other on different opportunities. Now, we definitely have some specialties and areas of strength, right? A team is composed of different strengths from individuals that make such a great team and a strong team. And everyone learns from each other. And we do have specialties like around governance, risk, and compliance, if you will, where you're conducting risk assessments, identifying risks for the organization. Do we have the correct mitigating controls to prevent these risks from affecting the organization? But the day in the life of, sometimes there's certain things that we do kind of canned. We always conduct certain things. And then you have the incident management, certain things that come up around, you know, a phishing email or, you know, I don't know, Russia being invaded and what's the risk? I'm sorry, Ukraine being invaded by Russia and what's the risk from our perspective on supply chain. So it's a little bit of, it depends on the day, which can be exciting as well, because it's not always in a box for us. We also conduct certain things because, so David mentioned threat hunting, which is a term being used in the industry, also known as incident detection. So instead of waiting for alerts that are generated from different logs and systems or partners like the FBI telling us if something's going on, we're taking what's called the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which is kind of an industry standard of tactics and techniques that attackers use. And we're hunting for information to see, is there something here that we're not aware of? So you operate off of a thesis and you go and analyze your environment. Is anything going on? And what can you learn from that? And what kind of future alerts can you create if something is triggered? So we conduct a lot of that. And then you have also day in the life of projects that are occurring in the organization. How do we provide assurance? Are security requirements being met? part of the user acceptance testing, we're typically involved to make sure that the security controls that we expect to be in these projects are actually implemented. So it kind of depends on day to day. So hopefully that gives you a lens into the daily life of some of our team members.
Thank you, Andrew. And yeah, just reminded me of how sentient this is every single day, especially the current one that we're living in. It was actually funny. We were going to meet with Marcus last week, and I had just looked at an article about federal cybersecurity guidelines in light of everything going on. So yeah, it's super sentient right now. And I'll pass that question back over to Ben, and saying for you, what does a day in the life of a cybersecurity or ICT professional look like?
Yeah, so for us, I have many hats within the firm. One of them is I'm the security program lead for one of these large vaccine management programs within the United States. And we run security operations for that today. So it's everything from incident response, compliance, pen testing, identity and access management, access control, whole bunch of different things, like all the different aspects. So we have a team that gets to do all those things. Similar to how Andrew set up in a way of, we have people that kind of blend across multiple teams, trying to stop that single point of failure. But then it's hard also. There are specialized people within our team that there's really only one or two people that can do that stuff. Example is, we have a pen tester who's very good at what he does, but we don't really have another person besides myself. I did pen testing a long time ago and been doing it for years. So at times I have to stick my hands in there as well. But those are things that we try to get everybody on board with and try to get people, their hands at different pieces. One of the scenarios I was thinking of, like the day in the life, it's like our pen tester, he's got a really fun job. He gets to go poke at the website, try to break it, make you go, what did you find? Like, how did you do that? So it's a lot of fun having people do that stuff. However, it's also very challenging when those things are found and you have a very high profile website that is on the public internet that you can't just take down and fix real quick. So there's a lot of things that we do to put different layers in place. So if we do find things that we can put mitigations in place, create special rules. So like in the scenario I was going to say was, our pen tester finds something new, some new vulnerability that's out there. Let's say our website is vulnerable to it. He can then work with another person on our networking team who can put some custom rules in place to stop those type of attacks from happening, while our development team, which is we have another section who deals with working with the business, to be able to fix that as fast as we can, but also fix it in a way that it's not going to break anything. It's been tested, and we're not just flipping things out and hope, fingers crossed, hope it works. So we get to talk with all sorts of different people. It's not just security sitting in a room. We're actually all over on the business too as well. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Ben. And super interesting to hear what you and other panelists have said about some of the different working together aspects versus different specializations. It's just, for someone like me who's newer to the field, just really interesting to learn about. So thank you. And I will pose that same question to Tanya to kind of describe, what is a day in the life like?
Yeah. So it's similar to what the others have said. And so instead of describing what I do, I'll describe what an analyst does, like a new hire within our organization. And we also have different specialties, right? We could have a group that's in threat detection or data privacy and protection, strategy, and then application, which is the group that I'm most familiar with, because that's what I grew up in the firm doing. So I'll speak to what I do, and it's similar in those other groups. And I mentioned to you that, we serve our clients. And so for my group, we do implementation projects for SAP, which is a large integrated system, which we call ERPs, and we have Oracle, and then we do some custom ones as well. And so what an analyst would do is work with their team members to go through the entire life cycle of rolling out a technology, right? You first start with kind of scoping and planning, understand what you're trying to implement, not only yourself for the security component, but for the people that are doing the training, to the people that are technologists. The entire team are going through kind of unique areas of what they specialize in. So in scoping and planning, the analyst would be looking at, okay, this is what we want to do, and this is what we're going live with. So say we're going to implement human resources module within SAP. And so in planning, you start thinking about, okay, what are the processes that will be put in place? Then you start to design. So you start to design it and you'll go in SAP and say that this is how we're going to design it in SAP. So when the users start to use the system for HR processes, they have the right security access to be able to do so. And restricted, right? Because it's very important that we don't release personal identification information to just anybody, right? And then we also look at making sure the risk of segregation of duties is adhered to, meaning that we don't want somebody to be able to hire an employee and then pay the employee, right? Because they can create a fictitious person within the organization, then they can pay that person and then receive it. So our analysts will look at that process, start thinking about how are they going to configure it in the system. And then the next one, they start actually going into the system and configuring that. And they're working with the rest of the team, and then they test it, and then eventually they go live. So it's that entire life cycle of the start to finish. And then the best thing about that is when your users are using the security that you created. So you now see that, yes, the work that you did, it works, right? Because you've tested it before you go live. And it's such a great feeling. But yes, we work with our clients side by side because they know their organization. And we typically know the technology better because we've done it for multiple clients before.
Thank you so much, Tanya. I appreciate you kind of walking us through that life cycle. And then because of that, I'm going to throw this next question at you first because I think it's timely. Although I will preface this because I know that things are constantly changing in everything in regards to digital skills or in this field. So I'm just prefacing this question. I know things are ever changing, but our next question is, what specific emerging skills are your current applicants missing that you wish that they had today? And then how can you expect those skills requirements to change in the future? Or is there anything in particular you see changing in the future? And I'll throw that right back at you, Tanya.
I don't think the skills that may be missing, but I would say we should really think about, and the attendees should think about, is that it's the soft skills, right? You can learn the technical skills, the schools are teaching you that. When you go on a job, they can teach you and help you enhance those technical skills. But it's more around the why you're doing the security that you're implementing, whatever it is, right? How do you make sure that what you're delivering or what you're configuring or what you're trying to secure is a purpose? So I talk to some technologists and they get excited about the technology and what they're deploying, but they forget the why, right? So I would say the why. And so understanding what is, the reason or the purpose for the security that you're trying to roll out, and think through that, and then understand how the technology is going to apply to that.
Oh, thank you so much. And I will pose that same question to Ben. What specifics, skills are current applicants missing that you wish they had, or how do you expect some of those skills to change going forward?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things, and it goes back to even when I interned. One of the things they wanted me to know was Linux. I had no idea how to do any of that stuff. I was a Windows person, loved Windows administration, and just had to get hands-on with Linux. I have some people that come in as applicants. They have experience, but it's not even to the point where they can tell me like, hey, how do you open a file? What command do you run? What program do you use to read files in Linux? And if you're in Linux, you usually know how to do something like that somehow, using some sort of method out there. Also Python, again, and you're asking too, do you see these things changing? Again, Linux is something that's still being asked for. Python for scripting, a lot of that transfers into AWS environments as well. So it's it's stuff that's still, it just keeps growing. I think the requirements maybe around the different skills change or their capabilities change. But again, it's like Linux, Python, and network security type stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I appreciate you lining those out for us. It's helpful for us to know. And I'll pose that same question to Andrew. Are there any specific skills that you think applicants are missing, or anything that you see changing in the future?
Yeah. First off, Ben and I have the luxury of being in the middle, right? So we get to hear what Tanya and David get to say. So this is nice for us. On a skills perspective, Tanya already talked about communication and the soft skills. That's honestly a lot of times, like, we interview folks when we have positions, and it's great that you have the technical capabilities, but it really depends on the position as well. Some advice I've heard on the penetration testing, Ben might attest to this, but it's great that you obviously have to know how to break into something to find findings and valid findings, but guess what? Maybe half your time's going to be spent writing reports for executives to read as well. So you have to have that communication skill, and written, verbal, depending on what's going on. Another component that is so important is passion. Tanya talked about the why of you're implementing something, but also the passion for an individual in the security space. When one of my canned interview questions sometimes is, where do you get your updated, information, cybersecurity news from? And depends, you'll get a gamut of responses, but typically, Twitter, Reddit, those are valid responses, because that's where the late breaking information sometimes happens. And who do you follow on Twitter? And you can just tell who's really ingrained from a passion perspective. They're not just doing this because it's a career. So that's one aspect of it. The other item that's not, Python is great because of automation for security, and cybersecurity expertise is expensive, and Python helps with automation. So that's also critical from a technical perspective in the future strategies. But another thing is sadly, lack of diversity in the industry. That's something that's super hard, that when you're trying to recruit for, and you want to have that group creativity, right? And the different sets of people's backgrounds and where they come from. And those aspects really are lacking, sadly, when you're going and recruiting. So that would be kind of the roundabout total things we're looking for.
Yeah, thank you so much. Some great points there, and I appreciate you elaborating on that. And I will pose that question also to David. What different skills do you see applicants missing, currently? And then are there any that you foresee in the future?
So I'll throw another vote up there for the soft skills, and also another vote up there for the passion as well. And I don't know that you can teach the passion, but I'll tell you what I look for. Is I'm looking for people that have like demonstrable effort outside of the courseware, right? Outside of what they're taking in the college. And it's really challenging. This is just such a fast moving industry. You guys are in the education field are so challenged to try and keep up with this stuff, that this is my full-time job, and I can't hardly keep up. And you're supposed to develop a course that's supposed to teach this, right? It's really difficult. So what I found is really valuable are the students that are participating in clubs, and they're going to competitions, and they're taking part in some of these extracurricular stuff and items, where those bodies and those competitions and those places are able to keep up, because that's what they focus on and that's what they're doing. So they might go to a hacking competition and be looking at, 0-day vulnerabilities that are no longer 0 days, but things that were fresh, like from a week ago, right? And there's you can't keep up with that. So, but some of these students that have the passion, they read that on Twitter or Reddit or whatever, right? And they're like, I want to check that out. I want to see what that is, right? And they'll go into Metasploit, and they'll get out their Kali Linux, and they'll be attacking stuff at their home labs, because that's where the passion is. So when I talk to someone and I ask a similar question to Andrew, you know, and they say, oh, well, I'm a part of this club and we do this thing and we went to a competition and I got my lab at home. I'm like, that's someone that really cares about it and they're driven. And I really like that, because right now, you know, what exact skills, it really depends on the position, and I'm really specializing. So there's stuff that these entry kind of level positions where the passion is more important to me than what classes have they taken, almost, because sometimes they're getting just as much from those competitions and other things they're doing than they've gotten for the course for these things. So from there, that's good. And the specialist positions, it's different. And that is that specialty, right? Like cloud security, it's just crazy in demand, right? We can't get enough of them. And with time, we'll get those, right? But then I don't know, what are we going to need next? An AI, cybersecurity AI specialist that is going to be in crazy hot demand, and we're not going to be able to find one, right? It's going to keep happening. But what is likely going to happen is the people in a cybersecurity position are going to get tasked with kind of figuring that out, and they will start to specialize on the job, and they'll pivot and they'll go to that new area. I don't think it's realistic to expect these students coming out of educational institutions to have that knowledge when the people in the field who are doing the job don't even have that. They're kind of making it up as they go almost, right? They're figuring it out with other super talented individuals across the country and work groups and, right? And different groups where they're getting together, hacking conferences where they're trying to figure this stuff out. So yeah, the passion is huge. And please, if you're capable, sponsor those clubs and sponsor those extracurricular things, because they're doing really good stuff, and they're coming out from those. They're coming out of those experiences with just awesome skills and awesome experiences, and they always have a great time too.
Yeah, thank you, David. I actually had a friend in college who was a computer science major and had a hackathon event for women, or hackers or women in IT, and it was so interesting to see. I volunteered, so it's definitely an exciting thing to see and participate in and get that real world experience. And I'll encourage folks too. I think we'll definitely have some time for Q&A. We have about two questions to get through, 1 or 2 questions. But if you have a particular question you want panelists to answer, feel free to drop that in the chat, and we can definitely loop back to that. And now, just as Andrew got comfy, Andrew and David got comfy in that kind of middle section, I'm going to turn it right back to you, Andrew, to be the first to lead on our next question. Can't let you get too comfortable. But I'm wondering, if you were starting your cybersecurity or ICT career over again here in 2022, how would you break into the field? And kind of on top of that, how do you recommend the applicants break into the field?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think I'm going to add too much value here, because actually what David talked about from clubs and different environment, kind of real, you're at that point of entry of your career. There's actually a joke in the information security place where you're looking for an entry job and you need 5 to 10 years experience, right? That's not reality, but you see job descriptions with that. So at the end of the day, getting some sort of practical experience under your belt, even if you're not paid for it from a club perspective. There's websites like tryhackme.com that you can go through these capture the flag or different exercises, I think are so critical, and just get involved in the community. At the end of the day, I use my example at Golden One. I wouldn't have gotten my current position if it weren't for someone I knew who happened to make an introduction, right? So you have to get out there and network ultimately, and show that you have that passion. So if I were starting my career again, I would start there. I would look at, kind of scouring also what's popular in the sense of what people are looking for from a hiring perspective. But granted, it's going to change, to David's point. But if you have the passion and you're reading and you're constantly tinkering and having that hacker mentality in the sense of analyzing how something could impact an organization, how you can defend against it, I think you're well positioned from a networking perspective. You're just going to meet great people, and it's a very small community. And you start taking the Venn diagram of cybersecurity and then Sacramento. You know, looking on this call, I probably know people, you know, that work with other people on this call. It's a really small community. So I would say just networking goes a long way.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And David, I know you mentioned clubs, hackathons, some of those, you know, competitions, or having folks work in a personal lab. Are there any other, you know, different ways that you would encourage folks to break into the field in addition to that?
For sure, yeah. Any of those internship programs, we've had a lot of good success with that. We've hired quite a few of our interns. But I would say, yeah, try and direct that. A lot of people come out with a lot of programming experience. I don't know if that's the nature of the programs that they're in at the different colleges, but it's not a differentiator anymore because almost everybody has that. So look for the thing that you want to differentiate you, is what I would say. Guide them in that way. And nobody's mentioned it yet, but NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, has a framework. They call it the Workforce Framework for Cybersecurity. It's also called the NICE framework. Super easy to remember, NICE framework. And it goes through all of the really cybersecurity specialties. And it needs to be updated because, as we already mentioned, things keep changing. But there is a lot of specialties related to cybersecurity that are detailed out in there. And if you go and you look through it, it's pretty exhaustive. So you got to give yourself some time to really digest it. But it goes through and it iterates through the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities that are required for each of these jobs. And then it also has separately the tasks that one would expect to have to perform for each of these roles. Right. And if I wanted to break in and I wanted to be, you know, whatever it is, right, in cybersecurity as a specialist, then I would look at that. I read about the different roles. I'd say, you know what, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. What do I need to really get involved in? Because even in the clubs, at the competitions and everything, it's not 100% pen testing. Right. There are a variety of roles in all of these places where one could choose to focus or specialize and spend their time. And if you could get in there, you know, take your personal time and figure it out and say, you know what, that's what I want to do. Here's what I need to learn how to do it. And then when you go to these activities, you go to these groups and clubs, you could say, you know what, I want to focus on that particular thing. I really need to learn that because I want to do it. And then when you apply, you haven't just taken, you know, courses related to it, but then you say, I went to these clubs and I was this role because I love this thing and I want to do this thing, right? Then you are now differentiated. You are now the qualified person instead of a bunch of people who look vaguely similar in terms of qualifications.
Thank you so much. And I will toss that next to Ben. To ask you, you know, if you're breaking into the field today here in 2022, how would you do it, or how do you recommend that folks break in?
Yeah, and just like Andrew and David are saying, getting around, getting your name out there, talking to people, getting to know other people, seeing what else is out there too, trying to get as much kind of practical experience as possible. Cybersecurity, there's all sorts of different areas to go into. So if you already have a kind of an idea of maybe what you want to do, or something that maybe really piques your interest that you just can't get enough of, then that's the thing that maybe you could try to shoot for. Trying to think of some other things around there. Keeping up with your news too, similar to Andrew was saying, nerding out on the latest and greatest of security news that's out there. Also, I think myself, I would try to go out and do more speaking events at a young age, trying to get up, you know, in class, they get you up there, you know, you do your thing, but it's with your 20 core group of people you're always around for the whole year. So getting maybe uncomfortable around other groups of people and getting more used to speaking, I think would be something else that I think would be something good.
Yeah, thank you. A good lesson, especially for us just starting our careers here. And I'll pass that same question to Tanya. You know, if you were breaking into the field today in 2022, how would you do it, or how do you recommend the applicants break in?
You know, I must say, I know it's a disadvantage sometimes to go first, sometimes it is to go last. So I agree with all the comments that were made. Where I would add is just start to leverage a network, right? Talk to people who are in the field, and just like, you know, Caitlin's posing those questions to us, pose those questions to people that you meet. Right? If you go to a conference, you can go to the different booths and find out what they do, and then start understanding what you would be interested in learning or interested in putting into your toolkit. And I tell my professionals too, think about what you don't want to like. There's certain things that you don't want to do, right? And then you can start checking those off, and then you'll narrow down what you're interested in doing. And so, you know, the conferences are one, even LinkedIn. I've had some either young professionals or some students that send me a LinkedIn, and I've actually they've reached out to me, I accepted it, and I've had some conversations with them. You'd be surprised of how many professionals would like to help you. So it's harder to do, just put yourself out there, but you're behind the screen anyhow. So you can send it out there and see if they are willing to meet with you so that you can share more of what they're doing. And then you can start thinking if that's what you want to do, one. And then two, if there's any opportunities within their organization.
Oh, thank you. I love, you know, all this different discussion of student networking and how to put themselves out there. I love seeing that, and excited to, you know, recommend that to folks. And then for our last question here, and we'll also be opening up from some questions in the chat, but kind of our last official question, you know, does your organization or business consider applicants without a bachelor's degree, or applicants who may have degrees in other subject matter? And I know, Ben, you spoke on this earlier, you know, regarding your internship and your experience. I'll toss it to you first to take it away.
Yeah, we have a couple different ways to come work for the company. And sorry, I have a child crying in the background. Hopefully it's not coming through.
Okay.
All right, awesome. Yeah, so we have internships. Those are for people within universities or colleges just trying to find a place to land. I got mine my junior year, and then got an offer after that to be able to go work. So pretty fun doing that. We have a new, it's new as of like 2016. There's an apprenticeship program where we are bringing in people that have high school degrees, GEDs only, and no college experience yet, but have experience doing the things that we want. Also looking for people that are different from different areas, having different ideas, people with maybe different values of how you think about things. So trying to bring more people like that onto the teams. We have, you can also come in as a contractor. Doesn't matter on your education level. You can come in just based off your experience. But mostly it's internships and then the apprenticeship program.
Thank you so much, Ben. Interesting to learn about that. And Tanya, I'm going to put you right in the middle and ask the same question to you. Does your organization or business consider applicants without a bachelor's degree, or ones who may have a bachelor's degree in a different subject matter?
So at this time, we only accept someone with a bachelor's degree, and we do also with a master's as well. So I have a master's degree as well. In terms of a degree, it could be anything. For the most part, we look at cyber typically, right? As we go to the schools, we look at the students with a cyber degree, but we have hired people from other programs. There was one professional, it was a number of years ago, so now cyber is pretty hot. She didn't have a hot cyber skill, she was an architect, but she took a number of training courses outside of her regular school curriculum, and we interviewed her, and then we hired in our strategy group. So it can happen, but we typically look for the cyber degrees.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll toss that same question over to David. Does your organization, y'all at SMUD, do you consider applicants without a bachelor's degree, or from those who may have a bachelor's degree in a different subject matter?
Yeah, so for every one of our, I'm pretty sure, and I've seen almost all of them at this point, I think every one of our different cyber positions has a requirement for an applicable degree or years of experience that match it. So really, it doesn't, it's not necessarily a requirement if you have that experience. So that would be different at the entry level, where entry level, it's not as important. But be honest with you, I have people that are applying at the entry level that have that also have it there. So it's not mandatory, but almost everybody who's applying has that at this point, even for some of those entry level positions.
Thank you so much. And last but certainly not least, I'll chuck it to you, Andrew. At Golden One, do y'all, do you consider applicants with or without without a bachelor's degree, or maybe those in different subject matter?
Yeah, so specifically for information security, cybersecurity, yeah, we absolutely do, because similar, we do or years experience or relevant experience, and it depends on the seniority, it depends on maybe the communication like we talked about earlier. So we definitely do, the short answer is yes, but it really depends on the individual, their experience. Frankly, also going through a program, you also have to be flexible, obviously critical thinking. There's so much other components. It's kind of like you went through the process to also get your degree, which is never an easy, it's a time commitment. So it builds some thick skin, if you will, on individuals and for them to be kind of viable in an organization. So the short answer is yes, but it depends on the individual and their overall experience. And it doesn't have to be specifically in a information security category, even if we're looking at that. It just depends. It could be in liberal arts. It could be all over the place. I want to kind of address, if I can, about someone asked about certifications also. Certifications are great, but it also depends. If you're too junior and you have a lot of certifications, it can be too academic. Yes, you went through the rigor to go get the certification, but you might only be academic on paper and not know in reality how it also operates. So in some instances, it could not be a detriment, but it's a lot of question marks when we're going through the hiring process, to be frank. Versus if you have experience and you have the certification, you know how it works in reality, and you're a practitioner, yeah, of course, certifications are a big plus when we're looking at candidates as well.
Thank you. And actually, I was really excited to see that question in the chat because it was a question I had personally. But I'm wondering, and I'll kind of throw this out to you all, kind of on that note, are there any specific certifications that you really love seeing in applicants or that you would recommend folks achieve? I know that I'm familiar. I know that Google recently came out with a bunch of kind of different IT related, certifications. Just curious, kind of posing it to all panelists, if there are any particular certifications that you look for in applicants.
I'll just, since I'm off mute really quick, if I can, the SANS certifications from GIAC, as a practitioner, I would say those are top of my list. If I see someone who has a SANS certification, those are definitely a little bit more down the weeds. It depends on what you're looking for, but those are definitely tough to get. Sad, very expensive to get, but other employers might support it when you're going through the process. We support it for our staff and we're internally, but those are, I would consider them in my top tier when we're recruiting.
Thank you. For other panelists, any other specific certifications that you look for in applicants or that you've noticed have been helpful?
I'll agree with Andrew there. SANS definitely top, the CISSP top, but those are, I wouldn't expect those coming out of this. What I've seen is some of these students who are aggressively pursuing this, they're passionate and they're spending some of their personal time trying to invest in themselves for this. I see them get the Security Plus, which is, not that it's going to, take them all the way in cybersecurity, but the fact that they've put forth the effort to get that it's good. It's impressive for me to see that. It's really like if someone came in for a journey or senior level position, they had that. I was like, oh, you got that when you were breaking in? Oh, that's cool. Right? But for someone who's not been involved at all and they're in school and they went and took that effort to go through it, the Security Plus is really, it's impressive to me.
Well, I agree with what David said. So we typically don't look for our analysts or someone coming out of school to have a certification. But if you have it, then we know they're really dedicated to the field. So I would say it's a plus. So one requirement to continue to get promoted, and it's really to get promoted to a manager level. So our levels are analyst, consultant, senior consultant, then a manager. In order to get to the manager level, you need to have a certification. And so the ones that we've discussed here are all ones that qualify for that. We actually will pay for that. We'll pay for your training to do it. We'll pay for you to take the test. So the entry level ones, you don't have to, but if you come in with one, I would think it's a plus.
Yeah, we push our team to do Security Plus, especially for new applicants, seeing that helps. The certification that Andrew was talking about, those maybe for like some of my other people that were, I'm like, oh, you have that one. Okay, let's talk a little bit, because that one takes a little bit of work as well. So both those certs are very helpful, especially for people just starting on. But again, yeah, Security Plus is an easy one for my new joiners, because it shows me that they have some sort of idea of what security is and that there's different pieces of it, and it's not just hacking, it's a bunch of other stuff. So yeah.
Thank you all so much. And we are kind of right on time here. I'll also say I have someone very close to me who's considering a career in this field, and I may or not be collecting all this information to distribute to them later on this evening. So thank you so much. I'm just going to really quickly here share our, sorry, I'm lost in my screens here for one moment. I'm just going to share our emails and really quickly on the back end here. And also just wanted to say a huge thank you to all of our guest speakers for your insights, the attendees here with us at 4:57 on a Thursday afternoon, learning all about this to inform curriculum and best support folks and our supporters again for making this advisory possible. Also really appreciate our planning team, Professor Marcus Geisler, as well as Jared Amalong from SCOE. So huge thank you for putting this together with us and for all of your work and collaboration. For everyone here, you're going to be receiving all of the materials from today's advisories, including the PowerPoint, the recording of this, and coming shortly here, Valley Vision produces a meeting proceedings report on all the advisories that we do, which is a really great little package kind of summarizing all the key findings from this event and making some recommendations. So that will also be coming along shortly. And kind of in closing here, one of my colleagues just shortly will drop a quick 2-minute survey in the chat here. And kind of a reasoning behind this is, of course, we want to hear how our events are, where there's always room for growth and improvement, but we are also considering doing a fall advisory on artificial intelligence or AI, and would love to hear if folks are interested in that, or kind of have you vote on what you might be interested in seeing. So that will be dropped in the chat for you all, as well as sent over email. But without further ado, I have hit my 4:59 time goal, and I'm getting you all out on time. So thank you all for joining us today, and wishing you a lovely evening, and huge thanks again to everyone for joining us. Just really appreciate it. Y'all have a good night and get home safe, or to your dining room table safe, either way, if you're working home.